Hi guys, welcome. Dave Vincent here, Philippine Bible Ministries. Ministry, I always say that. So, the question that I posed the other day, or the thought that I had, was that there's two last days. Seems obvious to me by any simple, simple common sense reading of Scripture that there was a last days in the time when the New Testament was written. They said that. And then that there's another last day at the end, and it's not one continuous last days as a lot of people teach for some reason. But anyway, that was just a thought to get people thinking, and also I want people to pull out of that whole mindset of looking for it and looking for the this and that and the other. And like Charles Spurgeon warned about it once. He says, "What is everybody worried about Napoleon? Or, people have been wrong and they'll be wrong. Do God's will." That was the whole point. Be free from that. Whether it's right or wrong, it's not something we should focus on at all. As a matter of fact, you shouldn't waste too many sermons on it or too much money and books and movies and stuff like that. Because it could very well be. I think it's wrong biblically, but that's another story. But today I want to talk about the terrible day of the Lord. The terrible day of the Lord. There's more than one terrible days of the Lord. Another thing you can discover simply by reading Scripture. I'm going to try to show you that. Um, Actually, I'm just going to talk about it because I don't know how to do this. Hey, got a minute. So I want to try to show you that right here. First of all, I'm going to open up my Bible online if I can figure out how to do this. Live action. Here we go. Okay. So in Zephaniah, so what we're talking about here is sometimes when it talks about the terrible day of the Lord, it's talking about stuff that's already happened, and it's clear throughout Scripture. I don't even have all the scriptures here, but a lot of the prophecies when they talk about and the sky will be darkened and that all these terrible things are going to happen. And all the water will be dry. It sounds like the Revelation, actually, which is when you look into it, that's called prophetic verbiage, prophetic. The writing, the way they wrote was not literal. It was not word for word. It's kind of funny. People say, "Well, it's all literal, except the part about," and then when it says shortly, well, that's not literal. So, but it's only literal when they want it to be literal, right? Nobody thinks God is a chicken that has wings when it says, "I hide under the shelter of your wings." So, anyway, so let me give you an example. In Zephaniah 1, it's talking about, I will hide from the face of the Lord. And it's talking about, um, I will consume man and beast. I will consume the beast of the beast of the heavens, the fish of the sea, and the wicked will cut off. And it says, I will stretch out my hand against Judah. So this is a prophecy, and it's talking about, things that are going to happen. Be silenced, because this is the day of the Lord, right? The day of the Lord, the terrible day of the Lord. So there was a terrible day of the Lord in Israel. There was a terrible in Judah. There was a terrible day of the Lord for that kingdom when the temple was destroyed and they were taken into captivity. It was a horrible day of the Lord. And then there's another one in Amos 5, and it's talking about a lamentation, O house of Israel. So it's the same thing. It's talking about the land will be forsaken, and it's talking about the stars will be turned into shadows of death in the morning. Um, it's talking about breaks out like fire in the house of Joseph. And it's talking about the face of the earth and how the rains will produce a strong ruin. And there's more. I'm not going to read all of it to you. Just to let you know it's there, right? So it's talking about a day of the Lord for what? For Israel. It's talking about for Israel. Oh, house of Israel. So it's talking about Israel. It's talking about Judah, kingdom of Judah, kingdom of Israel. When they were taken into Syria, they were destroyed, and they never returned. Israel never returned. Those people never returned. The people that returned to Jerusalem, they were mostly from the tribe of Judah and Benjamin, from some Benjamin and some Levites. 80 some 90% of the people Israel today, or Jews today, are from the tribe of Judah and Benjamin and a few Levites. So they were destroyed. A terrible day of the Lord. A terrible day of the Lord means, it could mean two things. It might not be a terrible day of the Lord. It might just be a day of the Lord. It also means justice. Like a day of the Lord, that last day of earth is going to be justice and new life, right? But it's also going to be punishment, the melting of the earth, the throwing people into the into into the lake of fire and whatnot. There's another one, a song of salvation, talking about the song of salvation to the land of Judah, right? and it's talking about grace and peace, and then there's another one in Joel. So there's several of these, right? There's several of these days of the Lord, to be honest with you, several. And so yeah, the days of the Lord. And there's also one coming up, a day of the Lord, terrible day of the Lord. So just so you know, if you look up some of that verbiage, you'll find that there's a lot of verbiage that was speaking about Old Testament stuff that's already been accomplished, right? So you could say, well, I've never heard of all this stuff happening. How is this going to happen? Well, it already happened. It already happened. It talks about, hang on, I'm going to pause this and find it. Okay, I found some. Jeremiah 4:23. Behold, the earth was without form and void, and the heavens they had no light. The mountains indeed they trembled, and all the hills moved back and forth. Indeed there was no man, and all the birds of heaven had fled. The fruitful land was in the wilderness. All of its cities were broken down by his fierce anger. The whole land shall be desolate, because I have spoken, I have purposed, nor will I relent and turn back from it. Jeremiah is talking about Israel. He's talking about Judah. He's talking about Israel. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about the day of the Lord when this stuff's happening. It's hyperbole, right? It's talking about all these things are happening because why? Because it was a terrible day. A lion from the forest shall slay them. A wolf of the desert shall destroy them. A leopard shall watch over them because of their transgressions. Because of their transgressions. So it's talking about the transgressions of Israel. So Israel experienced 2 days of the Lord and possibly. So in the Old Testament, even some of the prophecies about some of the other countries, especially in the book of Isaiah, I think, and Jeremiah, Isaiah for sure, and it's talking about prophecies against Egypt, prophecies against Babylon, and all these other nations. It even calls those a day of the Lord. So a day of the Lord is just a day of God's judgment, right? So there was God's judgment against Israel and Judah. There was God's judgment against the first temple and the first people. There was God's judgment. The Assyrians came in, and then the Babylonians came in, and then again in 70 A.D. there was another one which you can find in the scripture. Jesus talked about it. When will these things happen? When will all this be torn down? And he talks about it. That was a day of the Lord. That was a judgment of God, right? So any day of the Lord is a judgment of God, and so there's a final judgment coming. There's a final day of the Lord, and the final day of the Lord is on the last day, right? That's it. That's the final day of the Lord. And earth will melt. You can't get much more final than that. Everything melts with a fervent heat. There's a new heaven and new earth, and some are cast into the lake of fire. And others, on that marvelous day of the Lord, not necessarily a terrible day of the Lord, others are actually brought in to the kingdom. Well done, good and faithful servants. I hope that makes sense. God bless you guys. Ta-ta for now.